In this diagram, I will explain the data looping issue in the bidirectional replication configuration. Suppose a DML statement issued in the source database that updates a record A. As always, that operation will be stored in the transaction log files, and the extract process saves it in the remote trail file. The replication will implement the same update in the target database. As always, that update will be stored in the transaction log file of the target system. The extract in the target system normally saves that update again in the remote trail file of the source system. The same update statement will be executed again in the source database, and again it will be saved in the transaction log file. And so on. The same loop keeps going on and on. As you can see, the same statement is executed endlessly in all the databases. The same will happen to all the DML operations. The concept to solve this problem is simple. You just instruct the extract not to capture the DML operations that were executed by the replicate process. This solution concept can be implemented in many ways in Oracle Golden Gate. As I said earlier, we have a problem of having the transactions looping endlessly in the databases. To solve this problem, you configure the extract to ignore the transactions made by the replicate process. You will learn in the incoming slides how to implement this solution in Oracle Golden Gate. To prevent data looping in a bidirectional configuration, you first add two parameters to the extract process in the two systems. They are getAPLOps and ignore replicates. The first parameter instructs the extract process to capture the DML operations done by any application. Ignore replicates parameter makes the extract process to ignore transactions made by the replicate. But how the extract process knows which transactions were made by the replicate? You identify the transactions made by the replicate using other parameters. You can use the exclude user option of the tran log options parameter to specify the database user used by the replicate process. This option tells the extract process to ignore any transactions executed by the specified database username. The same applies with the exclude user ID option. In Oracle Database 12c, you have the option to ignore the transactions with the specific redo tag. I will show you later how to specify the redo tag and how to exclude them. You can also stop capturing replicate actions by excluding its transaction names. In this case, whenever the extract process finds a transaction in the transaction log file with the specified transaction name, it will just ignore it. Another solution to prevent looping is to use a trace table. You typically create a trace table in the database, and the replicate process stores information about the transactions it executes in that table. The extract process will check out the table during its normal operation to ignore any transaction executed by the replicate. The same concept can be done with the checkpoint table. As you see, you have a long list of options to prevent data looping in Oracle Golden Gate bidirectional configuration. Deciding which one to use depends on the database platform and release. I'm gonna shed some more light on those options in the incoming slides. The slide is showing an example of using the database username to ignore the replicate transactions. The first example is instructing the extract process to ignore the transactions executed by the user ggsrep. It assumes that ggsrep is used by the replicate to communicate with the database and execute its operations. You can use this option with Oracle Database, DB2, and Sybase. The second example has the same functionality, but for a user ID database. In that example, the extract process ignores transactions executed by the database user ID, which equals to 90. This option is available for an Oracle database. The examples of this slide is showing you how to use the tag to prevent data looping. First, in the replicate parameter file, you use a tag that will be associated with the transactions executed by the replicate. The value that comes after the set tag option is in hexadecimal. If you do not specify tag value, the default value is 00. On the extract side, you use the exclude tag parameter to instruct the extract to ignore the transactions with that specified tag. To ignore the transactions with that specified tag. At the time of this recording, you can use this option only in Oracle Database version 12c. You can also exclude the transactions using the transaction name. By default, the replicate uses the transaction name ggs_rep, and you can use the exclude trans option of the tran log options parameter to exclude the transactions of that name or any name used by the replicate process. You can use this option with SQL Server and Sybase databases. Another solution to preventing data looping is to create a trace table. The replicate process will store in that table information about the transaction it executes. To create a trace table, you use the command add a trace table in the ggsci command prompt. You need to use the db logging command to establish a database connection before you issue that command. If you don't specify the table name, Golden Gate will create a table with the name ggs_trace. If you use the default name to create the trace table, the extract and the replicate processes will automatically use it. If you create a trace table with a different name, you need to use trace table parameter in the parameter file of both the extract and the replicate processes. I'm not sure if this option works in other databases, but I know it works well with Oracle Database. The same way you use the trace table to save information about transactions executed by the replicate, you can use the checkpoint table to achieve the same task. As you know, you use the add checkpoint table command to create a checkpoint table in the target database. At the extract parameter file side, you use the filter table option to instruct the extract to ignore transactions that contain any operation saved in the checkpoint table. This option is available in MySQL database. As you have seen, there is a long list of options to solve the data looping problem in the bidirectional configuration. This matrix is showing you the available options in Golden Gate to prevent the data looping, and it shows you to which database platform you can use each of them. Please be aware that the first row in the table, which contains get APL ops and ignore replicates parameters, it is not a solution option in itself. It is required for the rest of the options. Also, be aware that the crosses in the cells in the table means that the specified option works for that database, but that doesn't mean it is not supported by the other databases. It may or may not work with the other databases. You also know that the trace file option is available for only Oracle 12c database. And that's it for this lecture. In this lecture, you have learned the following: understand how the bidirectional replication works in Oracle database, understand the challenges in implementing a bidirectional configuration, and understand the data looping issue and how to prevent it. In the next lecture, we will continue talking about bidirectional replication. Thank you very much. See you over there.